Meg LaPorte, co-founder of Art Against Ageism. It's great to have you join us, Meg. I turn it over to you.
Hi, hello, Jeff, and thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate it. But thank you again. As you said, Jeff, I'm Meg LaPorte with Art Against Ageism, and I'm going to talk first a little bit about myself and sort of the genesis of Art Against Ageism, the work that I have done leading up to it, and then we're going to talk about something called positive age beliefs. We're going to go through some slides about something called artistic activism. Then we're going to talk about the work that Art Against Ageism is doing. So, oops, sorry. So just a little bit about myself. I am 58 years old. I have been working in the senior living field for about 24 years and working really in the association or nonprofit world for about 38 years. I have a communications background, writing, journalism, etc. And I was managing editor of a trad magazine that went to almost every nursing home in the country for 9 years. I did this work, and that I mention this really, I point this out because it has a lot to do with the genesis of the work with Art Against Ageism. I have a master's degree in management of aging services, and I very much love art as well as activism. So to start with, I mentioned that I have a master's degree in management of aging services. I obtained that degree in 2014, and about that time, I started a blog called Age in America. And to back up even further than that, I started the work as a managing editor of the magazine in 2005 and did that work for 9 years, and then left. Then got my master's, then left and started this Age in America blog. And the reason why I bring up again the managing editor role is because I loved it. It was like I said, it was a magazine that was for nursing home and long-term and post-acute care professionals. So in that work, I got to tell the stories of the amazing people who work in the field of aging services, who are very passionate about what they do, very passionate about older adults. And I love telling their stories. Some of the stories that really captured my heart were the people who are the direct caregivers. So the CNAs and the nurses, and they would tell me over and over again how much they love working with older adults. And that really touched me. So when I left that job, I decided I was going to, excuse me, I'm sorry. I decided I was going to start telling the stories of older adults. I had told the stories for so long of the people who work in the field. I wanted to tell the stories of older adults. So at the time, I was a huge fan of something called Humans of New York. And Humans of New York is a blog that was extremely popular at the time. It still is very popular. It's about someone who a man named Brandon started it. He would walk around the streets of New York, take photos of people, and then ask stories about their lives, and then post it on a blog and on social media. And I thought it was so magical because I would see you could see the photo of somebody formulate, probably like we all do, some kind of idea or perception about them just by looking at their photo. And then you would read their story and realize it was most of the time your perception would change tremendously. So I wanted to do that for older adults, and that's how I started Age in America. It was very much fashioned again after Humans of New York, and I interviewed dozens of people. I would go to nursing homes, I would go to senior centers, assisted living communities, just walk on the streets. I would just ask people I know who are older these questions, and then I would ask them a set of questions that I came up with, take their photo, and then post it. And one of the questions that I asked everyone was, do you ever wish you were younger? And to my surprise, I would say 98% of the people said no, and that they were very happy where they were in their life. And I was really surprised to hear that. And I think it was really educational for myself, because at the time of course, this was about 10 years ago, I was a bit younger, and I probably had this idea that the older you get, the less happy you are. Now that I'm older, I see differently, and I'm probably in the happiest time of my own life. I just want to point out that this photo here is from that blog. And if any of you who are watching are from New York, you might recognize him. He happens to be an actor He was in a show called The Sopranos, and I won't say much else, but if you watch The Sopranos, you'll recognize him. He's a very nice gentleman. He let me interview him for Age in America. And this on the left here is Jordan Evans, the co-founder of Art Against Ageism. So just to go from Age in America to Art Against Ageism, when I did the Age in America blog, I interviewed the dean of the program of my master's program at the time. And he liked it so much that he asked me to teach an undergraduate course at the school where I had obtained my master's. It was at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So I did do that. I taught a course, and the course was called something like Leveraging Art to Change Stereotypes About Older Adults. And I had 4 students in the course. But although I had only 4 students, it was great. I compiled the syllabus, of course, and it was very much about what you're going to see in this presentation. In fact, what we did was Jordan was one of my students. So that's how we got to Art Against Ageism. Several years later, Jordan and I had kept in touch. Several years later, during the pandemic, we were seeing just how ageist the society was. And we were really frustrated about it. And we were trying to figure out what we could do about it. And so essentially, we decided to take the syllabus from that course and turn it into Art Against Ageism. And so what Art Against Ageism does is uses creativity and art to tackle ageism and advance positive age beliefs. So this slide, I want to demonstrate really just sort of the invisibility of older adults. And because I worked in the aging services field, I really wanted to point out, and that is very much the frame from which we came from when we established Art Against Ageism, and recognizing, of course, just the invisibility, the lack of knowledge about older adults, especially about people who live in nursing homes and other similar settings. So this slide represents the number of McDonald's in this country. So Jeff, if you think about it, do you know where the McDonald's restaurant is in your town where you live?
Yes, I do.
So I'm going to
We have
guess
one in town.
you have one in town. I'm going to guess that most people know where their McDonald's is in their community. And there are 13,529 of them in the United States, as a matter of fact. There are many McDonald's. Most people know in the town where they often visit where the McDonald's is in their current town. And I'd like to contrast this with the fact that there are 15,500 nursing homes in this country. Nursing homes. Do you know where your local nursing home is, Jeff?
Actually, no.
See, most people, unless you work in the field, you probably don't even know where your local nursing home is. And in fact, you have one and most people are going to have them in their town. There are more nursing homes in this country than there are McDonald's restaurants. And most people don't even know where that nursing home is in their community. It's usually set back or just sort of melts into the landscape. And working inside of that nursing home are sometimes 100 people who live there and about 100 people who work there. So 200 people every day working and living their lives. And I just want to point that out because it'll become relevant too very soon in some of the work that we do. So why is this? There we go. So a lot of our work is based on the research of a book called Breaking the Age Code. It was published a few years ago by someone named Becca Levy. She teaches, I believe, at Yale University. And what she did in this book was she had reviewed a lot of research, a longitudinal study that had been done, I believe, in Oxford, Ohio, and discovered that older people who possess what she termed, or she described, are positive age beliefs. That is, beliefs around aging that help them, that sort of support them and make them feel like it's okay. I'm older, but I feel good about what I can do or what I can't do. It's okay. And so she coined the terms again, positive age beliefs and negative age beliefs. And she discovered that people who hold positive age beliefs live an average of 7.5 years longer. And the converse is true if someone holds negative age beliefs. In addition, positive age beliefs also help people recover from disability much quicker. They help stave off things like dementia and also help prevent heart disease as well, according to the research that she did. Now, we feel like this is really groundbreaking work. And it helps, it supports what we do, because we like to think that if our art and the work that we do, the creativity that we put forth, helps to make people feel better about their age and feel better about aging, then perhaps it'll give them a little bit more longevity. Now, what is artistic activism? I believe I mentioned it earlier. Artistic activism is taking the art, the power and the emotion of art, and combining it with strategy. So like strategy of communications and PR. So artistic activism is something that's been around for many, many, many years, for millennia, essentially. And in more recent history, one of the best examples I can think of artistic activism is the AIDS quilt. So Jeff, are you familiar with the AIDS quilt, or the Names Project? I believe it's also called.
Yeah, I've heard of the AIDS quilt for sure.
Yeah. And I think I remember seeing it. I may have seen it in person on the mall in DC. I live in DC many, many years ago. And right now it lives on a website, as a matter of fact. The AIDS quilt was it was a compilation in the 1980s of quilts about people who had died of HIV or AIDS. And it was really important and really powerful in getting the administration at the time that the AIDS was happening, that it was rampant, recognizing that AIDS was a disease. And in fact, the administration, I believe at the time, didn't even want to admit that it was a disease. And we believe the AIDS quilt had a lot to do with helping that come to light. The civil rights movement was used artistic activism in many different ways. In the middle here, this poster by Emory Douglas. He was with the Black Panther movement, and he produced a number of posters to help motivate people and support people in the civil rights movement. On the right here is Barbara Kruger. She is an artist. She uses collage and photography. She produced this piece for the Women's March, I believe, in 1989. And it was around, the Women's March was around the pro-choice movement. There was a lot happening at the time that was chipping away at the legality of abortion. And she produced this poster for that purpose. Much more recently and much more contemporary, there's an activist artist known as JR. He is a pretty well-known street artist, photographer. He is based in France, I believe. He won a TED Prize in 2011, I think. I think he was given $100,000 for the TED Prize. And then he used that money to found something called the Inside Out Project. And he's standing on an example of a project, the Inside Out Project there. You can see all those photos. What the Inside Out Project does is it takes people's actions and asks them to take photos of the people involved in an action and submit them to the Inside Out Project. The Inside Out Project sends back these large-scale posters that community then wheat pastes or pastes somewhere in a very public place. This looks like it's New York City, actually. And they help to amplify the message from that action. And now they have actually had thousands and thousands of, since that time, thousands and thousands of actions have happened all over the world. And some of his work, he's done a lot of other work, as a matter of fact, too. Some of his work can be seen on the border between the Mexican US border. He's done work at the Palestine and Israeli border as well. So to shift now to the work that Art Against Ageism has done, we have used what I described to you briefly with JR and the other the folks that have used artistic activism during the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and the AIDS movement were really inspiration for Jordan and me to move forward with Art Against Ageism. And the very first thing that we did, we decided we wanted to create an interactive art installation, and using inspiration from Yoko Ono, who is a well-known artist in her own right. She had created something called, I believe, the Peace Tree or the Wish Tree, and they're all over the world. As a matter of fact, I think there's one at the Hirshhorn Gallery. I'm sure there are some in New York City. And we use that as inspiration to create the Aging is Living tree. And a nursing home in Baltimore put this in the middle. They helped us. They took our little idea and put a little tree. Not, it's actually not a little tree. That's kind of a big tree. It's a big plant, and put it in their nursing home lobby. We created tags in which we asked people, which on one side of the tag were questions about aging or age or ageism. And we gave them we had pencils sitting there. We asked people to write the response to those tags and hang it on the tree. It's now collected hundreds of tags, and other people have done it in other locations. And we just had one done actually recently in Washington, D.C. And we've collected the tags too and recorded some of the responses so we can see how people, as a sort of ethnographic research, to see how people feel about age and aging and being their age. So we actually got into some research. This summer, we actually partnered with an organization called the Mather Institute, or Mather. Mather does a lot of research. They also happen to run 4 senior living communities around the country, 2 in Chicago, 1 in Arizona, and another one in Northern Virginia. They also do a lot of research separately from that. So we partnered with them to put on a workshop that included an art kit. So they signed up 300 people who were 55 and older to receive this art kit that you see here in the picture. And the art kit was about creating a story quilt. And so over this course of 6 weeks, they were all met via Zoom and learned about activist artists. Pictured here on the upper left is Keith Haring. He also was by the way, he was very instrumental in the AIDS movement, in the AIDS quilt as well, but he is a street artist, and he was a street artist in his own right. On the right is Faith Ringgold. They learned a lot about these artists, and then they were asked to take that information and then create their own quilts using a prompt about aging. So this is just, and then let's see. This is an example of a quilt that this is actually the example that the quilt, someone I believe created this, or this might have been the template for it. They were given journals to write in, and then they were asked to just sort of complete using this as the template. And as it says here, new artists were introduced each week. And they were asked to write about their creative practice and learn more about it. It's helped inform them as they move forward in their own work. And so what's going to happen, they finished the workshop. They all did their own quilts. They had a culminating event. And the Mather started with, they had pre-surveys for everybody who was involved, and they're doing post-surveys. And the results of this research will be published next year. So a word about public art installations. This is something that we've been inspired by for a long time, and especially during the pandemic. I happened to discover JR in the Inside Out project when I was going down a rabbit hole on Instagram. They would post all about what they would do, and I realized at that point I really wanted to get a nursing home to partner with us to do the Inside Out project. And very recently, we actually had 2 communities. We had one community do the Inside Out project with us, and another community that did something very similar, though not officially the Inside Out project. So on the right here, these photos that show these black and white posters up on a wall, these were done at a community called AG Roads in Atlanta. We just did these 2 weeks ago. We took photos. So what we did back in March is we visited each of the nursing homes that they have. They have 3 nursing homes in the Atlanta area. They've been around for 120 years, and they wanted to do something to celebrate their service to the community and to bring the community closer to them, and to really bring the residents and staff to make them more visible, because they believe that, just like many other nursing homes, and we discussed earlier, that nursing homes are generally, and people who live and work in nursing homes and senior living are generally invisible. So we went to their 3 communities in March, took photos of 160 people. We submitted them to the Inside Out project, and they sent back these posters that you see here. We pasted these posters on the length of a wall that lined the campus of the community on a very busy road. It was a 300-foot wall, and we pasted all of these beautiful photos. On the left here is another pasting that we did, very similar to Inside Out, but not exactly. This was done in Washington, D.C. There were 70 people who live and work in a nursing home in Washington, D.C. A photographer took these beautiful full color photos. We produced large scale posters like you see here, and we pasted them on the outside of the nursing home wall. So I'm going to show you just a little video to give you better context. This is the nursing home in DC. So this exhibit, it became, it's a public art exhibit. It's a public art installation, and we're very proud of it. And it actually became part of an event called DC Art All Night that happened last weekend. I have another video. Oops. Sorry, this video is actually of the A.G. Rhodes installation that we did in partnership with the Inside Out project. And I sped it up because it's rather long, because there, of course, were a 300-foot wall and 160 photos. So and it was really it was such a great experience to do this in this way, because not only did the process, like the process of taking these photos of everyone in the community was really community building in and of itself, and then to do the pasting and have the community involved in it also was great. And while we were doing the pasting, by the way, we had lots of people driving down the road, because we did it in the middle of the day, beeping, honking their horn, or people came over from the area. There was a couple of stores across the street. They came over to ask about it. It was really, and we even went to a restaurant one night when we were in Atlanta, and the chef, we just happened to talk to the chef, who said he had driven by the installation earlier that day and wondered what it was.
So the posters are both staff and residents at
yes.
the nursing home?
Yep, both of them are. Yep, and it was very important for us to be very inclusive of both staff and residents, for many reasons. I mean, as you can imagine, it's not just about the residents; it's also about the staff and the people who care for them. So here's another. This is another project that we do. We call it the Own Your Age photo booth. We started doing this about 2 years ago. We create, basically what we do is have a photo booth, and we have a backdrop for it. We ask people, and we bring art paper or chalkboards like you see here in the picture. We ask people, we go to conferences. We've been to large conferences such as Leading Age, the American Society on Aging, and some other conferences in which we ask people to take a piece of paper or the chalkboard, to write their age on here and take a photo with it, and then we amplify it using social media and other means. And it's really a way to get people to really to try to dismantle age bias, to demonstrate that there are many different ways that people look at any age, and just sort of really just discredit that idea that somebody at a certain age has to look or act a certain way.
What were those conferences called again?
Oh, so one was Leading Age, is one conference where we had this done last year.
Leading, leading.
Yeah, Leading Age represents for-profit and not-for-profit nursing homes. And the other one was American Society on Aging, which is another national organization that has as its members people who work in aging services, a lot of gerontologists, and other similar individuals. This is another shot of the photo booth. So you can see the backdrop. We have the hashtag Own Your Age, and people do really cute things with their age, the way that they decorate it. We were just at a conference last week, a regional conference in Maryland, in which we did it, and it's interesting to have the conversations with people about it, because some people will come up to it and say, well, I don't want to own my age, and we completely understand why people don't want to own their ages, because of ageism. So people don't want to own their age because they're afraid that maybe if they're 57 or they're 63 and they're going to let somebody know they're 63, that maybe that means that their time is short at their work, or maybe it means if they're looking for a job, that being older, of course, as we all know, ageism happens, that is going to be hard for them to find a job. So it's interesting because we do all of these, the Own Your Age booth at so many different, many of the conferences, almost all of the conferences, are where people who work in the aging services field come to. So we have the conversation with them. Well, if you're working in the aging services field, perhaps you should think about owning your age, because you serve older adults who have to own many things about themselves. Either when they walk in the door of a nursing home, they have to own their disabilities, and you happen to know the ages of everybody that you probably are caring for in that community. And being older and in many cases means that a lot of people feel very invisible. So these are some resources that have really that have inspired us in our work. There's Breaking the Age Code, the book that I mentioned earlier. There's a great book called The Art of Activism. There's a couple of books on specifically on ageism. One is This Chair Rocks. It's written by someone named Ashton Applewhite. She also has a great TED Talk. And she really started, sort of launched the anti-ageism movement a few years ago. I would say about maybe 8 years ago. And then Ageism Unmasked was written by someone named Tracy Gendron, and she teaches at University in Virginia. The art kit, the Gorilla Art Kit, is really great. We ordered that on Amazon. It's really cheap, and it has really great ideas about how you can utilize art, or just sort of do art on the cheap. It even has a recipe for wheat paste, so that if you want to do some wheat pasting of posters surreptitiously or with the group in a community, it's really great for that. And then we have our QR code here. If anybody wants to sign up for our newsletter, that's also a link there. You can use your camera to get the QR code to sign up, or use the link. And I'll be happy to share the slides, of course, in a PDF. So, do you have any questions for me, Jeff?
So far we're good. I
Okay.
just tried it and I got the sign up page for
Oh,
the
good.
newsletter. So
Great.
it works.
Good.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that's the talk. Now,
I'll admit I
my
finished way
questions.
sooner than I thought I was going to. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I have some questions for you.
Shoot.
Um, how did the idea for art against ageism come about, and what sparked your interest in using art activism to combat ageism?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I told you I taught that undergraduate course in back in 2018, it was the dean asked me to teach a course based on the blog Age in America that I created. And I thought, how am I going to teach a course just based on Age in America? Because I don't really, it was just, it's a nice blog that has photos of people with questions. And yes, it's very interesting, and I think very enlightening, because it tells some really great stories. People tell really, really fascinating stories and answers interesting questions. So at that point, I did a lot of research on creating the syllabus, and I discovered artistic activism. Now, I love art. I'm a hack artist, let's just say that. I love paint, and I love pastels, and I love to create in that way. I also am on Canva every single day. So I love art, but I don't know all that much about it. So when I started, I thought, oh my God, I have to, I really wanted to do my due diligence and research for this syllabus. And I discovered something called artistic activism. I actually discovered a organization called the Center for Artistic Activism. And I attended a bunch of their webinars. I attended one of their workshops. I paid for Jordan and I to go through a workshop so that we could learn about artistic activism. And that really was the genesis of how we decided to use artistic activism to start Art Against Ageism. Does that make
Oh, that's
sense?
great. Yeah, and are they Center for Artistic Activism national, local,
No, they're national. I think
regional?
they're all remote. So you can find them at centerforartisticactivism.org.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, because we're uh, looking at doing intergenerational projects, and one of them was how about older people and grade school students draw on, we'll put out some paper on walls and you can draw on it. But
Mhm.
but wouldn't it be more of an enhancement if you made it more of an art activism kind of project?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And in fact, we are working on a project like that right now, where
Mhm.
we are working in Gaithersburg, Maryland. We're bringing together uh, older adults from a senior center and a retirement community to work with some younger folks who are middle school students who attend a youth center. We're going to bring them together to do some different kind of art medium, take a medium and decide and do something. So we're probably going to do maybe we might do something like the Inside Out Project. We might do a literary magazine. We might do, and maybe we'll have them do a mural. So,
Oh, wow. When
yeah,
you were talking before about your blog, and how it shifted to interviewing older adults, and you just find out so much. There's like their lives are so rich, you know.
yeah,
It's not just an old person there. Um, there's a
right.
young man that came into my YouTube feed who also does similar interviews and asks people how they feel about being older, and they get similar answers. And we know, from geriatric research that people, as they grow older, they become happier and happier.
Yes,
Of
yes,
course, certain things predicated upon it, such as, being prepared, uh,
yeah,
financially and health-wise and things like that. But for the most
yeah.
part, yeah, the happiness increases.
Yeah, so and you might be referring to the happiness curve, the U curve of
Hmm.
happiness. You've probably seen that. It is somebody did some research about that, how people are happiest when they're younger and into their 20s, and then that happiness sort of goes down maybe into their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and then it goes way back up after that. And we actually have when we've done many presentations and we've utilized that. And then I did hear at some point that I don't know that it had been debunked, but some people were concerned, well, maybe that's probably not the experience of everyone. There are a lot of, for Age in America, I interviewed people who lived in areas where they probably were pretty well off socioeconomically, right? And
Hmm.
so that probably may have lent to them saying that they, felt happier as they were older. It could have. And then, ageism makes aging really complicated too, though, right? So people's misperceptions about older adults, people's damaging stereotypes that they hold about older adults also makes being older complicated and difficult sometimes. But the truth is, I believe that the truth is that generally, yes, older folks really feel good about being older, and that it's not as gloom and doom as a lot of people might think it is. And the other thing I want to say about the questions that I asked in Age in America, I did a lot of research on the questions.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask questions that would elicit stories, but I also very much wanted to meet people where they were in their life. I didn't necessarily, I heard incredible stories of people who were in World War II or who survived the Holocaust or survived really, really actually terrible tragedies. Really interesting stories, some really great stories. But I also wanted to know where they were at that moment in their lives. I didn't want it to be all about their past lives. I wanted it to be about where they were currently. So I asked questions like, what is it like to be X years old? What is the worst thing that's happened in your life? What is the best thing that's happened in your life? And a few other questions. And all of those would somehow elicit these really interesting stories. And I think that whatever story you hear or read about is really important because I think it helps you bring closer to identifying with that person. Anybody who might be reading it or watching it, it helps them identify as another human with that person as another human, no matter how far away they are in the age spectrum from you. So
Interesting, interesting. And is there more you could say about the mission of Art Against Activism, and specific goals and art activism measures that you hope to achieve through
Sure,
this
yeah.
program?
Yeah, so Art Against Ageism is our initial, it's funny because our initial mission, and we've changed it recently, was to identify, amplify, and create artistic endeavors that confront and tackle ageism. And so when we started, we looked at other entities out there that were doing cool things to combat ageism. And then we put them up on our website to help amplify it. We talked about them on our social media. And one particular project is something called um, Age Friendly Vibes. And this person
Mhm.
who founded Age Friendly Vibes is Jan Golden. It's actually a greeting card company. It's out now become other things. She also makes art posters and more art prints. And she really decided that she was going to stop printing, she was going to counter the negative ageist jokes and greeting cards and make them positive and more accurate. And she's really done such a great job. She's really blown up, and we usually include her in our presentations as well. There were lots of other things that our other organizations are doing. The World Health Organization has done some great campaigns. They've created these graphical, cartoon-like things that show that help change your perspective around aging. And and so we did that for a while until we started, and at the same time we were creating our own ideas and coming up with things like the Aging is Living Tree, the mural idea, and some other things. And we actually did a workshop too. We got a little grant from the state of Maryland to do a workshop with the nursing home in which in which there were about 7 or 8 older women who did a dramatic play workshop. They took about 5 weeks to come up with a performance that they would put on, or spoken word, and it culminated in the end. And it was all about aging and how they felt about aging. It was really beautiful. So it's now evolved into our new mission statement is now leveraging an organization that uses art and creativity to tackle ageism and advance positive age beliefs. And that's a reference to the positive age beliefs, of course, is a reference to the Breaking the Age Code book that I mentioned earlier by Becca Levy.
Right, yeah. We know about her here too.
Oh,
Uh,
so you're
yeah,
aware of the book. Oh, that's
and
great. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Tracy Gendron was a guest like you
Oh,
on one of
fantastic.
these. Yeah, that
Okay,
was
that's
very good.
great. Yeah,
Uh,
that's fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what other ways does Art Against Ageism collaborate with organizations or individuals to partner the message? You know, what kind of partnerships would you say were like the most effective that you thought really shined?
Yeah, so I would say that most recently, well, the one that I talked about with Mather, that was really great, and that's yet to be seen. We're gonna be publishing the results of that research next year. Hopefully, we're hoping what that shows is that workshop in which 300 people learned about activist artists. I always get that messed up. Activist artists and artistic activism, and then created their own story quilts based on the prompt around aging. Hopefully we're hoping that what that did was help them feel more positive about their ages, and that the research, the evaluation of that will show that. And that's yet to be seen, of course. So that we think is a really great partnership. And once that's published, and assuming that it's positive, we will probably take that model and partner elsewhere with other organizations, and maybe even do it in an intergenerational way. Because we do know too that intergenerational relationships are very effective, and you've probably heard that, in helping to combat ageism. I would say also the very recent projects that we did with AG Roads, the two nursing home organizations, was really incredibly effective. And we hope to actually amplify that and replicate that across the country. We're working with an entity in Colorado right now, hoping to get a grant to do something similar at their community. They're an affordable housing community. And I happen to be on the board of Gray Panthers New York City, as you know. And we're hoping to somehow work with them to get more murals like that in New York City. And I'm also hoping that the temporary murals, the posters that you saw earlier, will actually prompt those operators, those providers to feel like they want a more permanent mural on the walls outside
Hmm.
their home. So we would love to see permanent murals as well, or more permanent murals, let's say. So
Oh, that's great.
the interesting thing
There
about one of
was,
the projects, so one of the projects that I meant from earlier, the public art display,
hmm
one of them, we took all the photos ourselves with our photo booth of all of the 160 residents and staff.
hmm
The other project, the one that had the full color posters on the wall, was done by a photographer, by a professional photographer. And we found that there's beauty in both of them, right? They were both really beautiful and really great. I think there's pluses and minuses to both as well. So we're hoping to combine what we learned from both of those projects to do something that will be even more effective and more community building. So I think I think it's great to have a professional photographer, but I also want the participants to feel very much a part of a community that's involved in it. Although that certainly that is what happened in both cases. So I think that yeah, so it's something that we absolutely are exploring.
Wow. And then going back to the blog and storytelling, how is storytelling a powerful tool to address social issues like ageism?
Yeah. So I'm sure you probably know, I think storytelling is such a powerful medium. It's so important in effectively conveying someone's life and effectively conveying what that person is like, what their power, what they have experienced. And I think that I think there's really nothing else like it. The way that hearing a hearing a story and learning about someone is really just a powerful way to combat all kinds of, I think, isms, as a matter of fact. So,
Yeah, so would you say it's effective in challenging stereotypes and
oh, absolutely.
shifting perceptions of people?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I said earlier, the humans of New York. So had you heard of humans of New York?
Um, I don't know if I heard from
Okay.
you, if we discussed it previously,
Okay.
but it does ring a bell.
Yeah, so humans, if you Google humans in New York, you'll find it's on all the social media platforms. At the
Hmm.
time when I so 10 years ago when I was starting the blog, it had he had on Facebook, I think he had like 9 million followers. I'm sure he has many, many millions of more followers at this point. To me, what was again so magical about that is the photo and the stories combined. And he also does some video, I think, now too. So if you see, I mean, when you see a picture of someone and you're just walking down the street and you see someone, it's very natural for us to look them up and down and think something about them and to come to some conclusion about them, right? It's just our internal bias is at work there, hard at work. Now, if you stop and you meet the person and then you learn about their life, that can completely change. And that's what Humans of New York does. And that's what I wanted to do with Age in America. So,
Oh, wow. And going back to the blog again, uh, was it part of your trajectory that informed your art activism work and the development of art against ageism?
yeah, absolutely. It was very much so. I think I'm not sure that I would have started Art Against Ageism if I had not first done the Age in America and then done the course in which I had created that whole syllabus and then met Jordan and stayed in touch with Jordan and developed this friendship with Jordan in which he was on board with it from the start. So I don't think any of that would have happened if it didn't happen in that way, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah. Um, Maybe we could talk a little bit more about Jordan later. Uh,
yeah.
I just had a few more uh,
Mhm.
uh, questions. Do you have an example of a an artistic piece or project that significantly impacted Art Against Ageism's initiative? I think you've shown some of them and how it contributed to raising awareness or driving change in attitudes and perceptions of older adults.
There are so many examples. I learned a lot about the examples when I participated in the Center for Artistic Activism's workshops. They also, by the way, the Center for Artistic Activism has a oops, something's happening with my Zoom here. The Center for Artistic, hello?
You're there.
Oh, sorry.
Your, your,
I think, I
your
don't know what I did.
picture is a
Sorry
little
about that.
jumpy. Yeah.
There. Sorry, I don't know what happened. That was weird. Anyway, the Center for Artistic Activism runs something called Actipedia. And it's like
Mhm.
Wikipedia, but for activism. And you can go to that website. I think it's actipedia.net, maybe. And you can go to the website and find any kind, if you type in like a subject, you can find any type of activism related to that subject. And so I've gone down many rabbit holes on that site. But one thing, but there's something, Jordan really likes this example. And I think we talked about it in class when I taught the class. There was an artist, I can't remember what town, I think it was in Norway, maybe, or maybe it was in Sweden, that came, this town did not have a museum. And they asked an artist to come to town and make a museum. So the artist, who worked in paper only, I think there was a paper mill in the town. I'm not going to get this completely right, but I believe there was a paper mill in the town. And the artist decided he was going to build a museum using paper or wood or something, the wood that they used to make the paper, perhaps. So he built this, really was a temporary museum, and he asked people to bring their artwork to it. And so they all came, they brought their artwork, he put it all up inside this museum that he had built or had built. And then he said to them all, I'm going to burn it down. It's going to burn, it's going to all be destroyed in a few days. So they had this art, they had this great, art exhibit. They all enjoyed it. And then he destroyed the museum after, like, me, I think it was a week or something like that. And what happened was the town was so taken by having that museum that they decided to build a museum in the town, which I think is a really great story. So they were so, like, it whetted their appetite for museum work and artistry and art, that they decided, we really want this, we want it to be more permanent. And so they built a museum.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to think of some other stories. They're just so, I mean, they're really just so many stories and so many artists that do incredible work and do some really cool things. So, and we feature those in our newsletter, actually. We try to feature in our newsletter each time a different new activist artist. So if you think about someone like Banksy, everybody knows, a lot of people know who Banksy is. Banksy is a street artist, and he's done a lot of work in London, and he's anonymous. Well, generally not a lot of people don't know who he is, but he doesn't just tag, but he'll make art in certain places, and they all have and they really comment on the political situation in the place where it's made. And he also does some cool things on his social media as well. Now he also he created a whole exhibit, I think in Paris, maybe it was somewhere, maybe outside of Paris. And I can't remember what it was called, but he did this sort of really bleak looking Disney. And everything in there was created by him, but it was all sort of really sort of kind of morose, but really had a political commentary to it. I thought that was really interesting. He also has a really cool documentary or film called Exit Through the Gift Shop, something like that. So it's
Yeah,
about
and
art.
we also find it hard to realize that ageism is a global phenomenon. So, uh, yeah, it's there in Paris too. You know, it's
Yes, it's
there in
everywhere.
Asia. It's in Europe.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
So,
Um,
and I'm sorry, yeah, if you were asking me too, if I knew about some specific activism that combats, artistic activism that combats ageism, um, JR has done specific. He has written a book called, I think he called Wrinkles, in which he he's done a project called Wrinkles, I think. He took incredibly much really large scale photos and pasted them up in Beverly Hills. So as a juxtaposition against the mecca of what is plastic surgery and
Mm.
not trying not to look old. He took the wrinkle, he wanted to showcase the wrinkles of people, and I thought that was very cool. He also did a book, and I can't remember the name of the book, but he has this really cool book about, it has photos of people at every single age up through 100, which is very cool. So,
Yeah. And you had mentioned uh, being involved with the Gray Panthers.
mhm.
How did you come to be with them? And does this experience influence your understanding of ageism and your desire to address it?
You mean the experience with Gray Panthers
Hmm.
or yes, yeah, yeah. So I have to be honest with you, I don't know that I know how I got involved with Gray Panthers, except that I met Jack Kupferman, and I don't remember how I met him. But I don't know if you know Jack Kupferman, you know that he's not a shy person, and he will reach out to you if he wants to talk to you, and he's
Hmm.
not going to say no, and you're not going to say no to him. I met him, and he asked me essentially to join the board, and so that was like about a year ago, and I really thoroughly enjoyed working with the board since then. And we're doing a lot of activity around honing in on our mission of ageism and how it relates to, how Maggie Kuhn, the idea that how Maggie Kuhn founded the national organization. So,
Awesome. And what motivates you to continue this work in combating ageism, and what keeps you inspired and passionate about the cause?
oh yeah, that's a good question. I'm motivated because I think ageism is something that we all have the potential to experience. And I think what that means is that means that we should all have a skin in the game, so to speak, because of that, right? It's not gonna,
Mhm.
it's only gonna escape us if we die young. So we all have a reason to fight it. And because I love art so much, utilizing art and creativity to help combat it, I think is a great way for people to ease into the idea of fighting an ism, right? So.
Yeah. And you your organization is mostly focused on ageism against
Mhm.
older adults, even though we know that it goes both ways,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
No,
you're
and it's
too young and inexperienced. I'm not going to listen to you. What do
no,
you
no,
know?
yeah,
Like that
yeah.
kind of thing. Uh-huh.
Right. So we don't want to be, I mean, we happen to be probably more focused on older adults because of our work in the aging services field.
Right, right, right.
But we also do a lot, we try to do a lot to recognize that it does go both ways. And when we talk about it, we talk very much about that. And it's what's interesting is when we had our Own Your Age photo booth, in some cases, we've had conferences where younger people have come up to me and said, I don't want to own my age because I'm afraid I'm going to be judged if being too young, and therefore I won't have enough experience in a certain topic in order to get the promotion or get the job. So we know that it runs both ways, right?
Thank you so much, Meg, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
I think it could have gone on for another hour. It was wonderful.
I could talk about it forever. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Take care. Good
You
night,
too.
everyone.